Safi, hey Zach. Today, well, there's been a lot of interesting stuff that's happened lately. I'm filming late at night today because I got to be on the radio almost. Yeah, it turned out last second as of, well, I'm gonna start at the beginning. I got a text this afternoon saying that another friend, Al Hassan, had invited us Peace Corps volunteers to watch him on the radio. On the way, we realized he actually intends for us to be on the radio with him, talking about, well, he said anything. And yeah, then we got in contact with one of the people in charge at Peace Corps to ask if this was okay, and he said no, so we ended up mostly just sitting around while he played music. And it was a lot of fun. So yeah, good experience. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to get on the radio, just because that would be really cool. And depending on what we talked about, that could also be really good for yeah, public health and getting word out on health practice. So yeah, it's something that I'm looking forward to possibly being able to do. I also have another story for today. So, for a Peace Corps assignment, we had to shadow somebody of the opposite sex to work, and I shadowed my neighbor to the market, and in there it was an interesting experience. I learned a lot of new words for various types of foods that they sell in the market, because that's what she worked at. She worked at a stand. In this case, though, I saw the food side of the market, which is something I hadn't seen before, and some of it... One thing that was striking was they stored food. They stored fish and vegetables by putting a piece of fabric over it and leaving it overnight, which was a little uncomfortable to see. If it makes you feel any better, it was dried fish, which is a little bit better than just fresh fish, so it wasn't like it smelled or anything, but it was still something that struck me as seeming rather unsanitary. Anyway, after about an hour at the market, my neighbor's co-wife, so how their situation works is there's two wives who are the wives of one husband who died a long time ago, and they still live together. The other wife comes by and starts talking to me, neither of them speaking any English, and the first wife tells me to go with her, and then we sort of meander through the market and go back home. And then I have no idea what to do. I don't know, am I supposed to complete the assignment? Am I supposed to stay here? Like, what do I do? And yeah, my LCF ended up saying it would be fine if I, as long as I had enough information to complete the questions, that I stay, and that's what I ended up doing. And now for some info on Gambian culture. Juju is a big thing here. Not necessarily an ever-present everyday thing, but it is something many Gambians believe in. And it's interesting because it has somewhat integrated into the Islam of the area, or more likely the other way around. The Juju existed first, and as Islam came in, it integrated in, and the Gambians did not give up their traditions and their traditional healing. They simply incorporated Islam into them. There's another PCV who is from Pakistan originally, grew up Muslim, and one thing he says is that the Juju practices are actually either very un-Islamic or anti-Islamic, which makes for an interesting sort of integration. Not too much unlike the idea of Jesus Christ as a war god in Anglo-Saxon culture. That said, there is a big exception to the Islam and Juju integration rule, and that is practices that involve shaking and tossing of objects that you read. The reason for this is because, according to one story, there were some villains that were after Muhammad and wanted to kill him. he hid himself in a house, and in this house a spider came along and, wanting to protect Muhammad, spun a web over the door to make it look like nobody had been there in a very long time. The villains then couldn't find Muhammad and then went to a Marabout, Marabouts being the people who practice Juju, and the Marabout then did the practice, cast it, and read and saw exactly where Muhammad was, and luckily for Muhammad, the villains didn't believe the Marabout and decided that he must be crazy and left. Since, you know, there was a web on the door, clearly this building had been abandoned for a long time. Even though the practice didn't get Muhammad killed, and it didn't really hurt Muhammad in any way, it still was outlawed because it was used against him. Or I say outlawed, it was still banned because it was used against him. According to Hawa, it's still considered anti-Islam to this day. One of the most clear examples of Juju that I see every day, or most days, is Fatima has a charm. It's something sort of like a necklace made of leather. Looks like it's worn backwards. That's got little pieces of the Quran sewed inside it. And it's something that is there to protect Fatima from curses. Or as Hawa said, if somebody was going to destroy her. And as for a final fun fact, one of the objects used in this practice, which for the record still gets used even though it's against Islam, is an object called an elengende, or at least it's in Jola called an elengende, and it looks like a giant kidney bead, but that said, Hawa has assured me that it is definitely not a bean. It's something that grows on a tree, but beyond that, no idea what you would call it in English, which is kind of cool, kind of fascinating, kind of interesting. In the future, there might be more on Marabouts and Juju that I talk about, but for now, that's the most interesting of what I have. So, been great seeing you. Hope you upload one of these videos at some point, Zach. When's that gonna happen? When's that gonna happen? When's that gonna happen?